What if stupidity isn't the absence of intelligence, but the surrender of it? What if the greatest danger to human civilization isn't found in the cruel, but in the mindless? Machiavelli understood something most people still refuse to face. It's not evil that ruins empires. It's stupidity, dressed in virtue. You see, stupid people don't know they're stupid. That's what makes them dangerous. They act with confidence, speak with certainty, and destroy with good intentions. They march proudly under banners of morality, believing they're saving the world, when in reality they're feeding the very system that keeps them powerless. Stupidity isn't about IQ, it's about surrender, the decision to stop questioning. When people give up thinking for themselves, they become instruments of control, tools used by others who understand power far better. Society has mastered the art of turning free minds into obedient ones. From the classroom to the workplace, you're taught to comply first, question later, if ever. You memorize, you obey, you repeat. And somewhere in that process, your ability to think independently begins to rot. Machiavelli would look at this world and smile, not with joy, but with recognition. He warned that ignorance, once weaponized, can bring down entire civilizations, because fools, unlike the wise, act without hesitation. And today, stupidity has evolved. It scrolls, tweets, and argues, but never thinks. It hides behind hashtags and slogans. It confuses noise for truth and emotion for logic. The tragedy: the intelligent few, the ones who still think, are called cynical, arrogant, or even dangerous, while the obedient are celebrated as good citizens. But here's the Machiavellian truth. Independent thought is rebellion, and in a world built on mental submission, thinking for yourself is the most radical act of power. So before we begin, I want you to remember this. Stupidity isn't natural. It's trained. And if you can unlearn what society taught you to believe, you'll see the world as it really is, not as you were told it should be. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I refuse to surrender my mind. Number 1, stupidity is not born, it's built. No one is born foolish. Every human begins with a mind full of curiosity, a hunger to understand, to explore, to question. But over time, something starts to happen. That spark of curiosity gets replaced by a quiet obedience. People learn not to think freely, but to follow what they're told. They stop searching for truth and start memorizing answers. The world teaches them that acceptance is safer than awareness. Slowly, thinking becomes a risk, and silence becomes a strategy for survival. From an early age, most people are trained to follow patterns, repeat after the teacher, copy what works, agree with the majority. This is how stupidity is built, not by nature, but by design. It grows every time someone chooses comfort over curiosity. When a person stops asking why, they begin to lose the ability to see how. And once that happens, they stop being individuals. They become echoes, repeating what others say, believing what others believe, doing what others do. Machiavelli once said, "The prince controls not the wise, but the obedient." What he meant was that true control doesn't come from power over people. It comes from the ability to make them stop thinking for themselves. When someone no longer questions what they hear, they become easy to direct, easy to please, and easy to deceive. That is the silent tragedy of human intelligence. It's not destroyed, it's surrendered. The world praises obedience more than awareness. The one who asks questions is called difficult. The one who simply agrees is called good. And this false idea of goodness keeps people trapped in ignorance. They mistake politeness for wisdom, conformity for intelligence, and repetition for truth. This is how a smart mind becomes a dull one, not by lack of knowledge, but by lack of courage to think differently. If you want to escape this invisible trap, you must learn to think with your own eyes. Don't repeat, reflect. Don't obey blindly. Observe deeply. Thinking is not rebellion, it's self-respect. When you stop surrendering your mind, you begin to see the world not as others describe it, but as it truly is. That clarity is rare, and that's why it's powerful. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose awareness over obedience. Number 2. The most dangerous fool is the confident one. Confidence without understanding is like fire in the hands of a child. It burns everything it touches. A fool who doubts himself causes little harm, but a fool who is sure he's right can destroy reason itself. The most dangerous kind of stupidity isn't silent. It's loud, proud, and absolutely certain. These are the people who never question their beliefs, never examine their thoughts, and never consider that they might be wrong. They speak with authority, act with arrogance, and convince others to follow them, not because they know the truth, but because they sound like they do. And when ignorance wears the mask of confidence, deception spreads faster than truth ever could. Machiavelli once said, "Men are so simple and so obedient to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." This isn't about intelligence, it's about awareness. People often mistake confidence for wisdom. They think that the louder voice must be the smarter one, that certainty equals strength. But the truth is the opposite. Real strength lies in doubt, in the courage to say, "I might be wrong." Only those who think deeply understand how complex truth really is. But the confident fool never sees this complexity. He oversimplifies everything, divides the world into right and wrong, good and bad, us and them. This false clarity gives him comfort and control, but it also blinds him to reality. The confident fool becomes a danger not only to others, but to himself. He cannot learn because he believes he already knows. He cannot grow because he's trapped inside the illusion of his own intelligence. Every argument becomes a battle, every disagreement a threat. And so he lives in a world of noise, always speaking, never listening. The tragedy is that others follow him. People are drawn to certainty. It feels safe. They prefer the confident fool over the thoughtful skeptic because confidence gives them direction, even when it leads them nowhere. That's how foolishness multiplies, through imitation of arrogance. If you ever want to separate the wise from the foolish, watch how they handle doubt. The wise question themselves before they question others. The fool never questions at all. The moment you think you're beyond correction, you've already lost the ability to think. Remember, confidence without clarity is chaos in disguise. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose clarity over arrogance. Number 3, stupidity hides behind morality. Human stupidity rarely appears naked. It dresses itself in goodness. People love to believe that their actions are guided by virtue, that they stand for what is right, and that their intentions are pure. But purity without understanding becomes dangerous. Many of the worst decisions in history have been made by those convinced they were doing the right thing. The fool hides behind morality because it gives him power without responsibility. When someone believes they are good, they stop examining the consequences of their actions. They no longer think, they justify. They defend their behavior not with logic, but with emotion, believing that kindness or righteousness automatically makes them correct. Machiavelli once said, "Good intentions are the most useful disguise for manipulation." He understood that moral certainty blinds people faster than greed ever could. When a person is convinced of their moral superiority, they become impossible to reason with. They don't listen, they preach. They don't think, they feel. And once emotion replaces thought, stupidity takes command. The problem isn't morality itself. It's the illusion that morality makes you intelligent. Goodness without awareness becomes control, and compassion without boundaries becomes weakness. The fool believes that being kind is the same as being right, but it isn't. Real morality demands understanding, not blind emotion. It requires awareness of impact, not just intention. Yet the modern world rewards shallow virtue. People rush to display how good they are, how caring, how tolerant, but very few take time to think about the truth behind their beliefs. This creates a culture of moral signaling, not moral strength. People begin to compete in goodness instead of understanding, and soon stupidity hides beneath the language of virtue. The wise person stays silent while the self-righteous shout the loudest. That's how intelligence becomes invisible, buried under the noise of fake goodness. The fool does not know that his morality is only a shield for his ego. He needs to feel righteous because it gives him worth. But morality without reflection is just arrogance in disguise. True integrity doesn't need to announce itself. It shows through quiet awareness and balanced thought. Machiavelli would remind you that morality becomes dangerous when it stops asking questions. When you believe you're always right, you stop learning. And when learning ends, stupidity begins. So never let your goodness blind your reason. The most intelligent act is not to appear righteous, but to stay awake. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose awareness over virtue. Number 4. The system profits from your stupidity. Stupidity isn't just a weakness, it's a resource, one that the world has learned to harvest. Every modern structure thrives on your inattention. The less you think, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the easier it is to shape your desires, guide your emotions, and control your behavior without ever forcing you. The system doesn't need to suppress intelligence, it only needs to distract it. And distraction is the most effective tool ever created to feed collective stupidity. The truth is, the world has turned ignorance into an economy. Your time, focus, and emotions are traded like currency. Every mindless scroll, every impulsive click, every unexamined opinion fuels a machine that profits from your mental laziness. The less you question, the more you consume. The less you reflect, the more dependent you become. Machiavelli once said, "He who controls perception controls power." In today's world, Perception is the new battlefield, and the system wins by keeping your attention shallow. When people stop thinking deeply, they become satisfied with surface truths. They start believing headlines instead of facts, trends instead of principles, and emotions instead of logic. This makes control effortless. You no longer have to be convinced. You only need to be entertained. Stupidity has been repackaged as convenience. You are offered endless choices that all lead to the same destination: distraction. The system doesn't want awareness. It wants engagement. It measures success not by truth, but by reaction. Every second of your attention has value, not to you, but to those who profit from your blindness. The tragedy is that people mistake comfort for happiness. They believe that constant stimulation equals progress, when in reality, it's sedation. The intelligent few notice this pattern and begin to withdraw from noise. They reclaim their focus, their time, their mind. That's why they become harder to control. A thinking individual cannot be manipulated easily because awareness makes him unpredictable. The system fears that unpredictability. It depends on the mindless rhythm of obedience. The crowd that doesn't think only reacts. The moment you slow down, question, and reflect, the illusion starts to crack. Machiavelli would say that power always follows attention. So if your attention is controlled, your power is gone. The real rebellion isn't loud, it's silent thinking. Refuse to be distracted. Refuse to be predictable. Reclaim your mind before someone else uses it. Drop this affirmation in the comments: I control my focus. Number 5. Stupidity is power without awareness. Power without awareness is like a weapon in untrained hands. It strikes without purpose and wounds without reason. When intelligence is absent, power becomes blind. The foolish person may hold influence, authority, or status. But because he lacks awareness, every decision he makes spreads confusion instead of progress. Stupidity doesn't always look weak. Sometimes it looks powerful, confident, and successful. But beneath that surface lies emptiness. A mind that reacts instead of reflects. The tragedy is that people often mistake control for competence. They see someone act boldly and assume wisdom, forgetting that boldness without perception is just recklessness. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." Awareness allows a person to anticipate consequences before acting, while stupidity moves first and thinks later. A fool with power doesn't plan, he imposes. He believes his strength makes him right, and that is where destruction begins. Because he doesn't understand the weight of his actions, he cannot correct them. His influence amplifies his ignorance, spreading it like wildfire to those who follow him. Power multiplies stupidity when awareness is missing. The unthinking individual becomes a mirror for others who are equally unaware, and soon entire groups begin to move without reason, reacting to emotion instead of truth. That is how stupidity grows, not from weakness, but from unexamined strength. Awareness is what separates influence from wisdom. You can't lead yourself, let alone others, if you don't see clearly. Many people chase power believing it will make them secure, but without awareness, power becomes a cage. It traps you in your own illusions. You stop learning because everyone agrees with you. You stop observing because everyone praises you. You start believing that you cannot be wrong, and that illusion marks the beginning of downfall. Awareness keeps power humble. It turns control into understanding and authority into responsibility. Without it, power only feeds ego, not growth. Machiavelli would remind you that true power is not about control over others. It's about mastery over one's own mind. The person who rules himself cannot be ruled by anyone, but the one who rules others without awareness is already ruled by his own ignorance. Remember, strength without reflection is just noise. The mindless may appear powerful, but their influence fades with time. Only those who see clearly create lasting impact. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose awareness before power. Number 6. The crowd doesn't need truth, it needs certainty. Most people say they want the truth, but what they actually crave is comfort. Truth is often complex, uncomfortable, and inconvenient. Certainty, on the other hand, feels safe. It gives people something to hold on to when reality feels uncertain. That's why the crowd will always choose a simple lie over a complicated truth. The human mind prefers clarity, even if it's false, because doubt demands effort. Thinking requires courage, and courage is rare. So people trade truth for peace of mind. They don't seek understanding, they seek reassurance. Machiavelli once said, "Men are driven more by illusion than reason." He understood that illusion has emotional power. It makes people feel right even when they're wrong. And when emotions become the compass, direction no longer points toward truth, but toward comfort. The crowd follows the loudest voice, not the wisest one. The one who speaks with confidence appears correct, simply because he removes uncertainty. In a world filled with confusion, certainty becomes the new god. People cling to beliefs not because they are accurate, but because they are stable. They would rather feel sure than be right. This is how stupidity survives, through emotional dependence on simplicity. The crowd does not question, it accepts. It repeats what sounds pleasing and rejects what feels uncomfortable. This is why truth often stands alone while lies gather followers. Truth requires patience, lies promise instant clarity. The wise understand that doubt is not weakness, it is awareness. Only the thinking mind can live with uncertainty. But the foolish mind sees uncertainty as a threat and tries to escape it by believing anything that feels certain. That's why people defend false ideas with passion. It's not about truth, it's about security. Certainty is a drug that numbs thought. The more people depend on it, the less capable they become of facing reality. The crowd wants to be told what to believe, not taught how to think. It prefers the illusion of control over the discomfort of freedom. Machiavelli would remind you that truth has never belonged to the majority. The crowd's comfort zone is built on illusions that keep it calm but powerless. To rise above the masses, you must learn to stand in uncertainty without fear. Wisdom grows only in the space where certainty dies. Don't chase reassurance, chase understanding. Don't seek to be right, seek to be aware. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose truth over comfort. Number 7. Intelligence turns into rebellion. Intelligence is not measured by how much you know, but by how deeply you question. The moment a person begins to think independently, they naturally drift away from the collective mindset. True intelligence doesn't seek agreement. It seeks understanding. That is why the thinking individual often feels like an outsider in a world that rewards conformity. When you start seeing patterns others ignore, when you question beliefs everyone accepts, your awareness becomes your isolation. Society is built to admire obedience, not reflection, so when intelligence awakens, it threatens the comfortable rhythm of the crowd. The crowd wants harmony, even if it's false. The intelligent person wants clarity, even if it's uncomfortable. That difference creates distance. Machiavelli once said, "There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success, than to lead the introduction of a new order of things." He understood that the act of thinking for yourself will always disturb those who don't. Intelligence is quiet rebellion, not through defiance, but through awareness. It doesn't fight the system. It outgrows it. The more a person understands, the less they depend on approval. And independence is something that controlled minds cannot tolerate. The foolish majority calls this confidence arrogance, because it reminds them of their own mental submission. When you no longer need validation, you become unpredictable, and unpredictability breaks the invisible order that stupidity depends on. Intelligent people often experience loneliness, not because they wish to separate, but because the world prefers simplicity over depth. Their silence is mistaken for pride, their caution for coldness, and their perspective for cynicism. But in truth, their detachment is self-preservation, a way to protect their awareness from the noise of shallow thinking. Intelligence naturally challenges illusions. It questions traditions, habits, and beliefs that have existed without reason. The wise don't reject society. They simply refuse to surrender their perception to it. Thinking deeply is not rebellion against others. It is loyalty to reality. Machiavelli would remind you that real power comes from self-understanding. And self-understanding always begins where imitation ends. The moment you stop copying and start observing, you step into rare territory, a place where few can follow. That isolation is not punishment. It's the price of awareness. The world may misunderstand the intelligent, but it secretly depends on them to move forward. So never fear being different. Fear being thoughtless. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I think beyond conformity. Number 8. Stupidity loves slogans, not questions. The modern fool is fluent in repetition, but illiterate in understanding. Words become weapons only when wielded with thought, yet the mindless wield them as armor, shielding themselves from reflection. Slogans replace reasoning, chants replace analysis, and memorized phrases replace inquiry. The problem isn't language itself, it's how it is used. People prefer simplicity over complexity. They want answers handed to them, neat and digestible, with no effort required. A phrase like "be kind" or "trust the process" sounds virtuous, authoritative, and intelligent, yet behind it lies a surrender of thought. Repeating slogans feels safe because it eliminates responsibility. If everyone else says the same thing, you cannot be wrong. Questions are dangerous because they require examination, scrutiny, and risk. Curiosity threatens the illusion of certainty. The crowd prefers the comfort of a chorus over the discomfort of solitude. Machiavelli once said, "It is better to be feared than loved. if you cannot be both. Words without reflection can control perception, even if they do not contain truth. Stupidity thrives in this environment. When people chant slogans, they feel connected, righteous, and protected. But that connection is a trap. They are not thinking, they are echoing. The more someone repeats, the less they reason. They confuse repetition with wisdom, slogans with understanding, applause with approval. The intelligent mind observes the rhythm of this behavior and sees its consequences clearly. Knowledge is replaced by imitation, judgment by agreement, and freedom by predictability. Those who question disrupt the chorus, so they are often silenced, ignored, or ridiculed. That is why slogans are powerful. They maintain the comfort of the unthinking while isolating those who see beyond them. The act of asking why becomes a quiet rebellion, a refusal to surrender one's mental autonomy. Every time a person stops questioning and starts repeating, they contribute to the inertia of collective ignorance. Awareness is the antidote. To think for yourself is to resist the hypnotic effect of conformity. Machiavelli understood that perception guides action. Words without analysis shape obedience. If you want to remain unpredictable, if you want to preserve the strength of your mind, never let the chorus dictate your thoughts. Speak only when you understand. Listen only when you learn, and question endlessly. The world rewards those who appear clever, but true intelligence lies in insight, not performance. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I question over repeating. Number 9. The fool is certain. The wise are uncertain. Certainty is the comfort blanket of the unthinking. The fool wears it like armor, convinced that his conclusions are absolute and his judgments flawless. He believes he understands the world fully, as if complexity could be compressed into simple truths. This unwavering confidence is what makes him dangerous, not because he is malicious, but because he acts without hesitation, without consideration, without doubt. The wise, in contrast, embrace uncertainty. They recognize the limits of their knowledge, the fragility of perception, and the constant need for reflection. Doubt is not weakness, it is the hallmark of true intelligence. The more you know, the more you realize how much remains unknown. That awareness breeds caution, patience, and insight, qualities the unthinking dismiss as hesitation or fear. Machiavelli once said, "Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality." All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration. The fool believes appearances are reality. He never looks deeper, because to question would threaten the comforting illusion of competence. This is why certainty and stupidity travel together. Certainty shields the mind from reflection, inquiry, and growth. It convinces the fool that learning is unnecessary, that questioning is optional, and that the world is as simple as he imagines. He cannot imagine a perspective beyond his own because uncertainty terrifies him. The wise understand that knowledge is infinite, that truth is layered, and that clarity is earned through effort. They welcome doubt as a guide, not a threat. While the crowd clings to absolute answers, the thinking individual navigates complexity, aware that conclusions are temporary, perspectives are shifting, and understanding is always evolving. Certainty is seductive because it feels safe. Uncertainty is uncomfortable because it exposes vulnerability. But it is only in embracing doubt that real power emerges. The fool acts without thought, confident that he cannot fail. The wise act with consideration, aware that every choice carries consequence. One follows impulse, the other strategy. One repeats what is familiar, the other discovers what is hidden. This is why wisdom is rare, and why certainty is often a mask for ignorance. Those who are willing to live in uncertainty gain freedom from illusions. They cannot be manipulated by appearances, slogans, or shallow logic. The unthinking are trapped in their own assurance, while the aware continue to evolve. Machiavelli would remind us that the mind that doubts is the mind that rules itself. The moment you embrace uncertainty, you become untouchable by the false certainties of the world. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I embrace doubt over certainty. Number 10. Thinking is the last form of freedom. In a world where most surrender their minds, the act of thinking becomes a rebellion. Freedom is not measured by movement or choice alone, but by the ability to reflect, analyze, and decide independently. When society encourages obedience, repetition, and comfort, thinking transforms into a rare and radical act. It is the last stronghold of autonomy. Every mind that refuses to be passive reclaims control over itself. To think is to resist being shaped by opinion, distraction, or illusion. It is to observe the world without surrendering to it, to weigh reality instead of reacting blindly. Machiavelli once said, "Whosoever desires constant success must change his conduct with the times." Those who think independently understand the fluidity of life, the shifting nature of influence, and the impermanence of assumptions. They do not bow to popular belief or convenient truths. They examine, question, and decide. In a sea of unquestioning minds, the thinker stands alone. This solitude is not a punishment, but a sign of strength. The act of independent thought separates awareness from passivity. While others repeat, consume, and obey, the thinking individual observes, discerns, and chooses. Every decision becomes deliberate, every action intentional. Thinking restores the power that others willingly relinquish. It allows clarity in chaos, focus in distraction, and direction when the world seems to pull in every way at once. That is why it is feared. Those who surrender their minds become predictable, controllable, and easily influenced. The thinker, however, cannot be easily swayed because his authority originates within. No slogan, illusion, or shallow certainty can command him. The moment you cultivate independent thought, you step into power. You become untouchable, not because others are weak, but because you are awake. Thought is the final frontier of freedom because it cannot be taxed, silenced, or stolen. It cannot be monitored unless you allow it. It survives outside obedience and beyond convenience. To think is to declare that your mind belongs to no one but yourself. Machiavelli would remind us that self-mastery is the highest form of control, and those who rule themselves are never ruled by circumstance. The crowd may follow illusions, trends, and superficial guidance, but the thinker navigates life with understanding, strategy, and awareness. To abandon thought is to surrender freedom. To preserve it is to wield power. In a world that profits from distraction, noise, and conformity, Thinking independently is the most courageous act. Do not trade your mind for comfort, approval, or ease. Guard it. Exercise it. Let it shape your actions and decisions. That is where true power begins. Stupidity is not the absence of intelligence. It is the refusal to use it. Every day the world surrounds you with distractions, illusions, and comforting lies designed to keep your mind obedient. The masses follow patterns, repeat slogans, and surrender their awareness, believing that safety lies in conformity. But safety built on surrender is an illusion. True freedom begins where obedience ends. The mind that thinks independently is the last frontier of power, the final untouchable fortress. Every thought you preserve, every question you ask, and every moment you refuse to accept what is easy over what is real strengthens that fortress. Awareness is not passive, it is action. It is the courage to reject illusions, to see beyond appearances, and to refuse mental slavery. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew that power belongs to those who control themselves first, who remain awake while others sleep in the comfort of ignorance. The world will never reward thinking blindly. It will mock, isolate, and challenge the independent mind. But those who dare to think, who dare to question, who dare to act with clarity, will always rise above the obedient crowd. Don't surrender your mind for convenience. Don't trade awareness for approval. Don't follow the illusions that comfort the majority. True power begins in your head, in the discipline of observation, reflection, and fearless questioning. The radical act today is not protest, not agreement, not approval. It is thought itself. If you remember nothing else from this message, remember this. Your mind is your last and greatest possession. Guard it. Exercise it. Make it untouchable. If this message resonates, do your part. Like this video, share it with those ready to awaken, and subscribe to the channel for more strategies that sharpen the mind and fortify your independence. Outthink the crowd. Stand unshaken. Rule yourself. Now, I want you to drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am untouchable in thought,